of you who don't know who I am the Children, Youth and Families Missioner for the Diocese. My name is Sophie. When I was given the post, the role descriptor asked me to put together a 5-year rolling strategy, or 5-year strategy for the diocese. Well, what I've done is I've put together a 5-step strategy, because what I've realised is that actually every single LMA in this diocese is completely different. Every vicar and every team of vicars is different. Every team is different. So there are some people who are really lucky enough to have a great team around them, and then other people who are really struggling on their own. So I've tried in the strategy to encompass all of that, so that you all feel like we're all on the same path, but we might be at different levels. So I wanted to deliver a strategy that was biblical, that was biblically based, that was visual, and was memorable. So 5 steps for a healthy harvest. A rolling strategy for Children, Youth and Families Mission in St David's Diocese. So the steps that I've listed there are prepare, plant, nourish, grow and harvest. I'm going to briefly go over those. Preparing the soil. Please be aware that there's lots of metaphor and imagery here, so read between the lines, okay? Okay. Preparation is vital. If you don't prepare your soil correctly, the seeds will not grow, the seeds will not flourish, and they will probably die. So if you don't prepare correctly, it will go wrong. You need to take out the weeds when you're preparing a bed for some seeds. You need to take out the weeds, and you need to filter the soil. You might even need to add some nutrients sometimes. And sometimes the soil may well need to be rested. It may need a time of fallow. Secondly, you need to plant seeds. Seeds can begin to be planted, and some seeds are scattered very particularly, like a pumpkin seed you would place very particularly in one place, and then grass seeds you would scatter. And so there are lots of different ways of planting a seed. Some are deep in the ground. Potatoes you would put in very deeply, and would keep covering them up with soil for a while, but others are very shallow. There are different ways of planting seeds. Then we need to feed and water. Watering and feeding needs to be done with care. If you overwater, you will drown your seedlings, and if you underwater, they will die and wither. No 2 seeds will need the same things. The next step is growth. As germination happens and growth begins, we need to think about the future. Does this plant need to be trained in a particular way? Perhaps it's a tomato that needs to have some bits chopped off in order for it to flourish well. Perhaps the plant needs to be encouraged to grow in a certain direction. And then we come to harvest. At harvest, we see the results of that hard work. At harvest, we see more seeds being spread. At harvest, we bring people in and we send them out. So the time from preparation to harvest will vary, depending on how well the soil is prepared, how big or small the seed is, how well it is fed, watered, nurtured, and how much attention is taken from pruning to training. And as I've already mentioned, there are some things that we need to be aware of. The first is that every garden is a different shape and different size. Your context is different. Sometimes plants die or need cutting back. That is okay. Sometimes the soil is tired and overused, and it needs to recover. It needs a time of fallow. Be aware of that. So now I'm going to go into a little bit more depth in each of those sections. Preparation. This is largely where I see my role is. In the whole of the 5 steps, this is largely where I see my role. Okay? So preparation. Training for people. That's yourselves included, but your volunteers, I'm here to help you provide training for them. We've already had prayer spaces in schools training this year. We've already had, I think there was some open the book training that went on. There's other training that's happened throughout the year as well. So training is certainly something that is key in preparing the soil. Confidence building. How many of you here do not feel confident in dealing with, say, youth? Okay. How many feel more confident dealing with little people? I can do little people. Okay. How many of you are the other way around? So how many of you are happy with youth? Put your hand up if you're happy with youth. Okay. But you're not so happy with little people. Okay. Not everybody can do everything, and that's okay. All right. But confidence building is something I'm here to hopefully help you do. I'm going to offer one-to-ones and ongoing mentoring. I say I'm hoping that the Children, Youth and Families Task Force are going to help me with that. But certainly I will offer one-to-ones and ongoing mentoring if you need it. Or if you want help with anything, just call me, phone me. There are people in this room who are already doing that, but that's what I'm here for. Phone me and say, Sophie, I've got no idea what to do with this. And I might go, I've got no idea either, let's try and find someone who can. Okay? Because none of us is perfect. Networking. So we've already begun to network, and essentially this is us coming together. And when I say us, anybody that's working in children, youth and families, coming together to talk about those things that are going well and those things that are not going well. We do it about 4 times a year, over lunch. The Plant Dairy team rock up. The Centres of Mission guys come along as well sometimes. Often we do it in the Centre of Mission in Cross Hands. We have a cup of coffee, we have some lunch together, and we talk about the stuff that's going on in our parishes. And it's really helpful because it means that you're then sharing a wealth of experience. A wealth that, Esther and Mike and Michelle are really experienced with working with young people, and they are there to help us. 20% of their time is for the diocese. Use them. Building relationships. Yeah? We're so caught up in our LMAs at the moment that actually, look at us around the room here, we're so caught up in the LMAs that actually what we need to be thinking about is building relationships with each other, because we can't build relationships with other people if we can't build relationships with each other. Okay? It just doesn't happen. Sharing best practice. Let's share ideas. Let's share the things that go well. Let's share the things that don't go well, because actually that's just as important. Listening and resting. So listen to the Holy Spirit. We've forgotten to do that. We've forgotten to open our ears and listen to what's going on in the world, and allow yourself time for rest. And finally, in this section, although this is growing all the time. This is organic and it's growing all the time. I was doing some online videos. I'm not sure that they're working so well, but that might be because you guys don't know about it. So I'm going to give it some more time yet, but they don't seem to be working. So if they're not working, I'm not going to waste my time doing something that's not working. Okay? But if they are working, tell me. If they're helpful to you, so there's videos on my online YouTube channel on Forest Church, on setting up a youth group, those sorts of things. So there's all sorts of different videos that you can access, and I'm trying to do more all the time. Okay? So there's also a website where you can access YouTube. It's www.stdavidscyf.org.uk. Now, whilst I'm on that, one thing that you need to be aware of is that as of September, I am no longer going to email LMA deans, okay? Because I'm sorry guys, you're useless at disseminating information, quite frankly. So if you are interested in children, youth and family stuff, you need to go onto that website and you need to subscribe. Okay, if you subscribe, then I will send you out regular updates as to what's going on, any training that's happening, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in children, youth and families, that's where you'll find the information. Okay? Planting the seeds. Planting the seeds. This is the bit that I call pre-discipleship. Now, look, I've put Plant Dairy and Centres of Mission and other things in here. That doesn't mean to say that those don't fall into the other brackets as well, but actually a key amount of the work that they're doing is in this bracket. Okay? So Plant Dairy is doing some amazing work. It's really, really important that we work with them. We support them because that's a really good foot in to families. Okay? So if they are being seen to do that work, then we must go in and we must share time with them. Find your local plant dairy centre and spend some time with them finding out what they do. Okay? Right, centres of mission. Guys, I don't really need to speak for these guys over there. They are doing some amazing work. Some fabulous work. I've got 4 young people coming on the pilgrimage this year, which I'll tell you a bit more later on, that are coming from the Centre of Mission in Cross Hands. 4 young people that up until just recently did not know Jesus, and now they do, and we're looking at possibly them committing to Jesus whilst on pilgrimage this year, which is just amazing work that they're doing. So we've prepared the soil and we've started planting some seeds. Schools work is a really, really important part of planting seeds, and something that we can all get involved in. I have had lots of success in doing schools work just recently, and as a result my youth group has doubled in size in the last couple of months. So it's really, really worth doing schools work, because then it grows other things as well. Projects. What do I mean by projects? Well, what I mean by projects is one-offs. So it might be that you want to do a fun day, or you might want to do something that is going to encourage people into your church. Anything like that, it's really, really worth doing, and you never know how much of a seed it might just plant. So if you want to do a project and you don't have the resources, I might be able to help you. So talk to me. Have conversations with me. Working with partners. Okay, so when I talk about partners, I mean people outside of the church organisation. So I'm working quite closely at the moment with PAVs. I'm sure you've heard of them. You've got your own equivalents in your own archdeaconries. Work with them. They want to work with you. The youth services really do want to work with us. They don't want us bashing children over the head with the Bible, but they do appreciate that we do have a spiritual understanding that they do not, and they need us. Okay? So use those relationships that I'm beginning to build, and relationships that you can build as well. And finally, Alpha and Emmaus courses, or whichever your preferred courses are, they're a really good way, continue to be a really good way. I use the Alpha course, the Youth Alpha, in schools as a confirmation course. So I find it's really helpful. But there are some really, really good courses out there that you can use to engage with children. And the Youth Alpha questions actually are really good. There's lots of questions in there that children really engage with. It's a good place to start. So once we've done the planting, we then need to begin to nourish. So this is the bit that we would know as discipleship. Okay? So, Youth Action Group, this is where I come in. So I'm in the process of putting together a Youth Action Group. I say in the process, it's going very slowly at the moment. So what I need from you guys is to find who your 16 to 25 reps are, and if you don't have a 16 to 25 rep, someone who would want to be on the Youth Action Group. And we used to have a youth forum, and the feedback that I was getting from the young people was it was all right, but they weren't doing enough. They weren't involved. They want to have a say. They want to do things. They don't want to just be sat on the sidelines at the diocesan conference. They need to be involved. Toddler groups, again, you can get help with toddler groups from Plant Dairy and from the Centres of Mission. They'll help you. I'm happy to help you with those as well. Content, make sure when you're starting a toddler group that people know that it is a Christian toddler group, because if you start off with just toddler group, they're going to assume that it's just the same as any old other toddler group. Okay, so make sure that people know what it is they're buying into. Chaplaincies. I believe personally, and I think it's a conversation that we're going to be having, is that we need to have more lay chaplains in schools, for instance, so that there's someone regular contact in school, as well as the vicar. Okay, it's really important that we are encouraging and facilitating other people to go into schools. It doesn't have to be just us all the time. Yeah? Okay. Retreats and holidays for families, youth pilgrimage. Now, the youth pilgrimage is something that has already happened. So we ran a pilot scheme last year. We had 10 pilgrims last year. This year we have 23 pilgrims. So it's more than doubled. This I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on, involving children, youth and families in church. I'm going to talk a little more about that in more depth later on. Home groups. How many clerics have a home group or Bible study going on in their church? Okay, so not too bad. So what you're doing is you're building up people, you're building up families, you're building up relationships, and that's what this is all about. It's all about building relationships. And finally, church plants. Okay, so there may be occasions when you feel that your church is not actually doing what you need it to do. All right, particularly if you've got people who are coming in who have never done church before. When I say church plants, okay, it might be a messy church. That is technically a church plant. Okay, so I'm not talking necessarily Citizen Church in Cardiff or Hope Street in Wrexham, but what I am saying is that sometimes our churches don't meet the needs of the people where they're at the moment. So we need to think outside of the box. Okay? This is probably where I can come back in again and help a bit more. So young vocations, we're working on how we can build young vocations within the church. One such program is an apprenticeship program, which I can tell you more about later on if you like. But there will be an apprenticeship between, so it's the Welsh Government are paying for some of it. St Paddens are working alongside this as part of, they're the ones that are sort of coordinating it all, and Coleg Cigar as well. So there will be a year-long apprenticeship for anybody between the age of 18 and 30 to work in churches. This means that you can get a person, I think for as little as £50 a week, to help in your churches, and you're teaching them and helping them learn. Parenting for faith. It's really important that we are encouraging our parents to encourage their children at home. Okay, so if they're not getting any faith at home, then they're not going to be growing. It's like learning to play the piano. Alright? You go to piano lesson, if you don't do the practice in between time, you're not going to get any better. If you have to really think about what is it that these children are doing one end of the week to the other. So I'm going to start, if I can, to send little cards. So when I go into the school on a Wednesday morning, I'm going to send a little card home with the children and say, this is what we've learnt this week. Perhaps you can think about this and this before next week. Yeah, so they're getting a kind of in between with mum and dad at home. We've already got the youth pilgrimage, but I would hope that eventually we can do other trips, retreats, and so on and so forth with our young people that will encourage them and deepen their spiritualities. And then finally we come to harvest, which is where we encourage a culture of risk-taking. So we're sending people out as Jesus did, sending our young people out, sending our families out, and saying, go and give it a go, see what you can do. So we're encouraging people to go out into the world. But we're also providing safe places for our young people to lead. It might be that you've got an 11, 12-year-old who's really keen to do church. I've got one in mind who has told me she wants to be a vicar. And so I've given her an opportunity to preach. Okay, so you sit down with them and you walk them through the process of preaching, and then they write a sermon and you check it over and you send it back and you say, right, you need to do this, isn't it? It takes time. It takes time, but it's important that we do these things and we encourage people. Again, encouraging the gifts of the Spirit. Hopefully, when we've got to this place, our families will be living well and encouraging others. So we want our families to be growing and flourishing. We want to be sending people out to prepare more soil, to teach, train and encourage, and finally to sow new seeds. Hatch, match and dispatch.
Anyone can take sulphur with
Before we go any further then, what I want you to do is have a think around the tables about other life events other than baptisms, weddings and funerals. So, go!
The first thing that came to my mind was divorce.
Oh yes, I know. Well, I breaks down. That's probably.
Can I have have some suggestions as to what other life events there might be that we as a church could get ourselves
Blessing a
involved
new
in.
house when someone's moved in, they ask you to come and bless it.
Blessing a new house when someone's moved in, brilliant.
School leavers and starters.
Transitions, graduations, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Anything else?
Divorce.
Divorce. Okay. Yeah.
A big thing for lots of lads, all those years ago anyway, was legally being able to buy your first pint of beer.
Yeah. Okay.
Significant birthdays and anniversaries.
Significant birthdays and anniversaries. Yeah.
Adoption.
Naming events. I think
Naming
particularly
events.
in trans situation and so on, where
Yeah.
a really significant thing has taken place.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Retirement.
Retirement.
Moving in together.
Moving in together.
Adoption.
Adoption. Brilliant. I love that one.
Coming out.
Coming out. Yeah. Anything else?
Passing your driving test.
Passing your driving test. Anything?
New job.
Sorry.
Losing a pet.
Oh yes, actually that's quite significant for some people, particularly if you've got people who live alone and their pet was their only company. Life events are rites of passage. They inform our futures. They leave a mark on our lives. So even moving house leaves a mark on our lives. It can be a time of high stress. It can be a time where things don't go as planned, and it can be a really important time for the church to be there for those people. Okay, so think outside of the box when you're thinking life events. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Wendy McGarvey. Wendy has been a source of support and love since I arrived in my parish, and she's just full of wisdom and full of advice of how we can engage with schools.
I thought I'd start with what types of schools out there. I know many of you probably already engage with schools, but there are different types of schools out there, and depending on the type, depends on their faith. So voluntary aided school, that's where I work, is a voluntary aided school, and they are religious or faith schools, and the governing body of these schools employ the staff, and they also set the admission criteria. The school buildings and the land are usually owned by the diocese, and the local churches linked to those schools will appoint the majority of the governing body members. You then get VC schools, and there is a lot more of those. They're voluntary controlled schools, and they're a cross between a voluntary aided school and a community primary school. The local authority will employ the staff, and they set the admission criteria like a community school, but it tends to be that the land and the buildings are owned by the diocese, and they also appoint some members of the governing body. Not as many as a VA, but they certainly got a proportion from the churches. Then you get the county primary schools, and these are obviously state-funded schools where the LA runs them, employs the staff, responsible for their admissions, and they own the land and buildings. And it's really important to know what type of school yours is if you plan to go in, because that will give you some idea on the emphasis they place on faith. The curriculum. Now, you don't need to know the ins and outs of the curriculum, but I think it's interesting for you to know how the curriculum that we've got now has come about. This curriculum now is based on 4 purposes. So these 4 purposes underpin every part of the curriculum. So you've got ambitious, capable learners, enterprising, creative contributors, ethical, informed citizens, and healthy, confident individuals. And if you go into schools, you will hear those 4 purposes being talked about an awful lot. Each of those 4 purposes have statements that support them. For example, under ambitious, capable learners, you'll have a statement that says set themselves high standards, seek and enjoy challenge, which obviously is something you would want every child to be able to do. For enterprising, creative contributors, they're suggesting that children think creatively to reframe and solve problems. For ethical, informed citizens, they'd want children to understand and exercise their human and democratic responsibilities and rights. And healthy, confident individuals, one of the statements under there is form positive relationships based upon trust and mutual respect. And when you think about those statements, the one thing that can give those children all of those is RVE, religion, values and ethics teaching. That underpins everything. So every school, the curriculum subjects have been changed and have now become curriculum areas. So they're curriculum areas of experience and learning, and they're called AOLEs, and you will hear that phrase a lot when you go into school. They're expressive arts, health and wellbeing, humanities, languages, literacy and communication, maths and numeracy, and science and technology. And RVE comes under humanities, which you get RVE, history, geography and business studies. In each of these AOLEs, there are then statements of what matters, which then breaks it further down. So that's what a teacher plans to. So they look at their AOLEs and then go to the statements of what matter. So RVE, religious teaching changed its name to religion, values and ethics because I think it was more encompassing. Community schools, without a religious character, they must teach RVE in line with the agreed syllabus for that county. For VC schools, they too have to teach RVE within the guidelines of the agreed syllabus, but they also must take into account their trust deed and what it says in their trust deed. VA schools do not have to teach RVE in line with the agreed syllabus, but they must adhere to their own trust deed. The Church in Wales has produced a guidance for church schools. It's a very comprehensive guidance and it's on the Church of Wales website. Obviously collective worship, which I should imagine many of you would be involved in. There is a statutory duty and has been since 1944 for all children to receive a daily act of collective worship. There is the exception that parents may withdraw their children from collective worship. They are no longer allowed to withdraw them from RVE teaching. That has changed. So children have to have RVE teaching but can be withdrawn from collective worship. The Act states that all collective worship should be mainly of broadly Christian character. Now, collective worship, probably to many of you, you see a whole room full or a hall full of children. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Collective worship can be done as a whole school. It can be done in groups. It can be done in classes. So you won't necessarily see children sitting in a hall every day for collective worship. And you won't necessarily see them sitting there at 9 o'clock. It doesn't have to happen at 9 o'clock. It can happen at any point in the day. Wasacre guidance sets out the benefits of collective worship. And I think it's a good thing to be reminded about what collective worship is all about. Promoting spiritual development, obviously, that should be at the heart of it. Contributing to personal development. And it should benefit the whole school community. It should link the school community to the wider community. And it should enhance an awareness of global citizenship. And these are really, really important points to remember if you are going into schools. So, if you're supporting or visiting your local school, you're probably asking yourself the question, well, do they want me in? Yes, they do. They do want you in. The changes in the curriculum are encouraging schools to engage with their local community and make children aware of the area in which they're in. And it's the word Cynefin, you will hear the word Cynefin being said a lot in schools. And you can contribute so much to that by going in. So how do you approach them? So ring and make an appointment to talk to somebody. It could be that you're pointed in the direction of a class teacher, but again, they're pointing you to the person that can best help you help them. So what do you suggest when you're there? So ask them what they'd like support with. Collective worship is probably going to be a really popular suggestion. Could you have events to develop community links? Could you display work within the church from the school? Could you do fundraising? It might be when it comes to collective worship, you might want to suggest just supporting maybe once or twice a term to begin with. From a school's point of view, all visitors like to be a bit road tested before they make a sort of big commitment to a regular slot. So don't be disheartened if they say, oh, would you just want to come in maybe once or twice? They don't mean anything by it, but they have also got their parents to consider. So if you're coming in doing an assembly or a collective worship, they need to know what area and what angle you're going at as to how they're going to have any responses from their parents. Keeping our parents happy is probably a bigger and more difficult job than actually teaching the children. So that can be quite difficult sometimes. So if you've got your foot over the door, what do you do next? So make sure if you're invited in for collective worship that you understand the times that you're required to be there. But times are tight. Know exactly how long you've got to for your assembly and stick to it. Schools do run to a tight timetable. Agree the structure of the service. Who will open it? Will it be you? Will there be a staff member there to introduce you? Will you begin with prayer? Will they have a candle to light? Will the children say a prayer? Are they used to that sort of thing? How will the service end? Will you hand over to a member of staff? And also be aware if there are any behaviour issues or children with autism, any ALN. Do be aware of the issues that are in the room. Be prepared for wrigglers. You get lots of wrigglers in collective worship. So try and keep your presentation short, lively, but visual. So moving forward, it will take time, and you're there to develop a friendship with the school and enhance their curriculum. It's different from being in church where you're there to develop the Christianity of your people in church. But you're there to enhance their curriculum, and that's why they want you in. You're there to give moral grounding to those children. What I would say is whenever discussing your own faith, be mindful that there will be very many faiths that, unbeknown to you, will be in the class. And there will also be children there without faith. Use the phrase, some Christians believe, or I believe. Never just say, Christians believe. Children ask all sorts of questions. Be prepared. I would say answer honestly. Children understand when you're being honest. They know when you're fudging it. Above all, enjoy it. Enjoy your time in school, because the children certainly do. Thank you.
I think Wendy has already given us lots of really good advice when it comes to working with and engaging with schools. Looking around the room, there's quite a number of people who I know are either school governors at the moment, have been in the past, or are actually a chair of a governing body at the moment. When you're appointed to being a governor, you're appointed for 4 years. And what it means really depends upon the school that you're appointed to. For those of you who have ever done any governor training, the word that comes up time and time again is that you're asked to be there as a critical friend. And what that means is that as a governor, it's not your job to run the school. That's what the staff are paid for. But you were there to support them, to monitor what they're doing, and if there are things that you think could be done differently, to kindly and gently speak up with the ideas that you have. And sometimes getting that balance is a very, very difficult thing. None of us perhaps like to be overcritical, but sometimes it's important that we are willing to speak out. And equally, we need to remember that it's the staff who make the day-to-day decisions about the running of the school. So being a critical friend is probably the best way to approach being a governor. So in all schools, whether it's a CP, a VA or a VC, you have responsibility for the curriculum, you have responsibility for leadership and management, you have responsibility for the finance of the school to make sure that resources are being used correctly, and also you have a responsibility for the health and safety and the well-being of everybody associated with the school. And can I say, I think for us, the well-being role is really, really important. And also you may be asked to work with subjects as their areas of learning and experience develop. So as an ex-historian, I often try and support with humanities and work of that nature. And in a sense, it really depends on how much time that you have to offer. When Wendy gave her presentation, she spoke about the differences between a VC and a VA school. In a voluntary controlled school, it's basically run by the local authority with our input, and there's always a small number of what we call foundation governors on the governing body. And as well as everything to do with the day-to-day running of the school that I've already mentioned, the role of a foundation governor is to make sure that the Christian values are being taught correctly, that collective worship is happening within the spirit of the law, and really to show a Christian presence within the school. And then in a VA, it's very much the same. But I suppose in a VA, the difference is that it's the diocese that has very much a majority say in how the school is run and organised. And that's reflected because in a VA school, the majority of people on the governing body will be foundation governors. So that Christian voice, that Christian ethos should be there in all of our schools, even if you're a governor in a CP. But it's particularly important for a VA. If you go on our diocesan website under the Education tab, there's quite a lot of information there on what it means to be a school governor, the sort of skills that we would be looking for, the time commitment involved, all of that kind of thing. But what I would say is it's a very, very rewarding way of either you yourself or somebody in your congregation actually being a Christian presence within our schools. A lot of our talk today, particularly in the education part, has been around primary schools. And I'm very conscious that many of us may have secondary schools in our LMAs and in our parishes as well. From being an ex-secondary practitioner, we do welcome people in. I think there tends to be a little bit of a misconception that actually any clergy involvement, any LMA involvement stops when the children leave primary school. Secondary schools are obviously much bigger. It can be much harder to get that foot in the door that Wendy has talked about. But all secondary schools on their senior leadership team will have somebody who is responsible for collective worship. So again, that may be a good place to start. Their governing body structure will be very similar. We only have one VA secondary. We don't have any VCs, or not church-based ones. But again, there would be the opportunity for governance. And again, sometimes just having a little bit of an introduction into a secondary school can be helpful, and I know I've done that for a number of people in the past, and again it's something that I am quite willing to do. But I would say secondary schools do love seeing people in. It's just as valuable as going into CPs and VCs. And I think in terms of the new curriculum as well, secondaries are moving towards it. And again, perhaps that gives us another foot in the door. So I'll leave you with that thought. Don't forget our secondaries. And if there's anything at all that I can ever do to help you with your school's work, then please get in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you reminded me. So the Children, Youth and Families grants are available. They are up to £1,000, and they are available for projects, for new initiatives, but they're also available for ecumenical projects as well. So if you have any ecumenical projects that you want some money for, then that would be quite helpful. So in order for you to be eligible for those grants, you need to have a conversation with me to tell me what it is that you are thinking of doing and what you want the money for. You need to ask me for a grants form, or if I can't give you a grants form, then you can get them from the diocesan office, although I suspect that you're more likely to get it from me because the diocesan office is busy. But the grant form is also on the website, so you can get it off the website as well. So that's www.stdavidsyf.org.uk, and there's other resources on that website as well.
We are limited as to how many of these grants we can give out a year, but we would like to give out as many as possible. They're also available for church schools to apply for as well. So church schools can apply for things for resources.
And plant dairy.
And plant dairy projects, and the centres of mission can as well.
Okay. I was going to do some other stuff, but I think perhaps you guys have all had quite enough for one day, so I won't do anything else. What I would like to say is that I don't have the answers to everything, but I am more than willing to help and support you in any way I can. Okay, but please do contact me if you want help, support, prayer, anything at all. The website's there for you. There's grant money available for you, and there's resources over here if you want to have a look at them before you leave as well.